Jerome Corsi, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
It's a real honor to be with you. Thank you very much.
Okay, so let's start off before we get into this, what just seems to be fascinating bombshell evidence that JFK wasn't killed the way they claimed and not by who they claimed, right? And this is something many of us have suspected, especially since they have released, they still are holding on to like 3,000 pages of documents, right? But they're supposed to give us everything and they won't. And they dropped quite a few, but they won't give us the rest, which is really suspicious. It's very suspicious.
Very suspicious, yes.
And many people believe that America died the day that JFK was killed, that this was the turning point in our country, that different forces took over at this point.
I think that's true. We're going to discuss that.
Wow. Okay, let's first start off with the narrative that's out there. What's the common theory that the belief of how he was killed and who did it?
Well, the Warren Commission was the definitive government narrative, and it concluded that Lee Harvey Oswald, who was a former Marine who had defected to the Soviet Union and was working in a clerk position in the Texas School Book Depository, on the 6th floor overlooking the motorcade, after the limousine, JFK's limousine, had passed the Texas School Book Depository, took a Mannlicher Carcano rifle, which was a surplus World War II Italian rifle that didn't work well for the Italians even in World War II, with a misaligned scope, took 3 shots at JFK through a tree, hit him twice, once in the back of the head, once in the back, which is a shot that came out the neck and went and hit John Connally in the seat. 2 shots that hit Jack Kennedy, 1 shot that missed Jack Kennedy and hit a bystander. And the conclusion of the Warren Report, which is held for 60 years, was that Lee Harvey Oswald was the lone nutcase assassin of Jack Kennedy. That's the official narrative.
Okay. Now, you and your co-author, Dr. David Mantik, have done a lot of investigation. What was the main? Now, a lot of people have been investigating this for a long time, so you're definitely not the first, right?
No, by no means. And we credit a lot. A lot of the previous work has been excellent. I think our book is different in kind. Our book is really a paradigm shift and a different altogether approach. Dr. Mantik has a PhD in physics. And he also is a MD who has practiced radiation oncology for over 40 years. He's still practicing. Radiation oncology, of course, he's reading X-rays for cancer patients. It's a very specialized field. It requires a great deal of excellence. He's brilliant. Dr. Mantik has been studying the JFK X-rays for really 30 years. And he's seen them more than anyone else. He's seen them 9 times. Before he was denied permission to come back. And he did optical density measurements of the JFK 3 skull X-rays that are in the National Archives. Now, optical density measurements are science. You take a densitometer, which is this machine, scientific instrument, it has a lever. So you put the X-ray in, and you put the lever down, and a beam of light comes up through the X-ray, and you measure just how much of the light that was emitted comes through the X-ray, so you can tell what you're looking at. Is the object dense? It's bone. It'll turn white. Is it nothing there? It'll turn black because all the silver nitrate on the X-ray turns black. It's a negative. But it's precise. And so what Dr. Mantik has concluded, and he's been publishing this for 30 years, is that I wrote this book to explain it to the public and to put it all together. But the point with him, it's told in the first person. It's Dr. Mantik's story. But what he has proven is that the 3 X-rays that are in the archives of JFK's skull from the autopsy, first of all, they are JFK because the teeth match a pre-mortem X-ray of JFK's skull that's in the JFK Presidential Library up in Boston. Second, all 3 have been altered. They're not the original. They're all faked. They've all been altered to mask evidence of frontal shooting. And number 3, JFK was hit 3 times. The X-rays show detailed evidence of 3 shots to the head. 1 hit at the forehead, right forehead, at the hairline, and the bullets went back to the back of his head. You can actually see the bullet trail. You can see the bullet fragmenting. It splits up as it enters the head to very tiny little dust-like fragments. The largest fragment with the most heaviest, most momentum is at the back of the head, and it does not exit. That is obviously a frontal shot. Then JFK was also hit obliquely, a shot that hit from the grassy knoll, that hit him in the temple right here in this bone before in front of the ear, and it blew out the back of his head in a massive blowout. And just before that shot, a shot hit Jack Kennedy in the back of the head at a low angle, and it blew out part of the front of the head. Now, what this is 3 different shots, 2 from the front. And there was also a shot through the windshield that hit Jack Kennedy in the neck. So there were at least 3 shooters, one on the grassy knoll. And this is scientific evidence. The book has a lot of illustrations. We show you exactly that the x-rays leave no doubt that this is the truth. So 3 shooters, at least one from the grassy knoll, one on the south side of the triple underpass across from the grassy knoll. There was a railroad yard above the triple underpass, and there was a shooter behind a cement fence at the top of that railroad yard. So, and the third shooter was at a low angle behind Jack Kennedy, probably in the Daltex building. This was a triangulated kill, which indicates very clearly that this was a conspiracy. This was and none of the shots that hit Jack Kennedy's head came from an angle, which was the Texas School Book Depository 6th floor window. So Lee Harvey Oswald did not shoot any shot that hit Jack Kennedy's head. I don't think he shot any shots at all that day. The government began covering up the evidence from the first moments of the assassination. When the JFK limousine came to Parkland Hospital, the Secret Service had buckets of water, and they were cleaning out the back seat with all of the gore and the blood, and they were altering a crime scene.
Yeah.
And the bullet could be seen, a bullet hole could be seen coming through the window. It was obvious to people because when a bullet goes through safety glass, the outside is smooth. It's a puncture mark. It's the inside of the glass that bevels, and people could see this. So the Secret Service immediately cordoned off the JFK limousine and got it out of there so that people could not photograph it. And they were altering the evidence of the crime scene. And that's a very important point, because if the government were really seriously investigating a shooting that they hadn't been part of, they would immediately preserve the evidence and want to know who was the shooter. Here, they're destroying evidence. And it goes on. It goes on. So they take Jack Kennedy's body. He's dead. When he gets into the operating room in Parkland, the doctors all see that the back of the head is blown out and there's a puncture wound in the throat. And the doctors say immediately that he was hit by shots from the front. They had no doubt that there was frontal shots. And they also had no doubt that he was dead, because they could see through this gaping hole in the back of his head that a lot of his brain had been blown out. And the cerebellum, which is a part of the brain at the very back, different in color from the rest of the brain, was hanging out. So they tried to save his life because he was the president, and they had to do everything they could. They did a small tracheotomy to try to get him breathing again. And finally, when the doctor said, they were getting ready to do cardiac massage to get his heart going, one of the doctors said, "This is ridiculous. He's dead. His brains are on the floor. Just stop it." So about 20 minutes into it, trying to revive him, the doctors at Parkland declared that he was dead. And within an hour and a half, they did a press conference and told the world that he had been shot from the front. And 2 of the doctors did that. Dr. Malcolm Perry, who did the tracheotomy, Dr. Kemp Clark accompanied him, and Malcolm Kildoff, who was the press secretary traveling with Kennedy, gave a press conference, and he put his hand to his forehead where the forehead bullet was, and he said, "Jack Kennedy was killed. It was simple. He was killed by a shot to the head." He did. And that's where he was holding his finger.